All right, hello everybody. Let me do a quick search on email and stuff like that, just to make sure nobody's sent any questions. And this is our Q and A number 200. Trumpet Q and A number 200. That's a big deal. Let me push this down a little bit. Number 200. Congratulations to you guys, because without you, this wouldn't be happening, right? So I'm going to put a link in the chat to a playlist. I was talking about this album with a student of mine earlier today, and I thought, hey, you know what? Let me share that link. It's Calvin Owens, Houston is the place to be. Now, do you know what? I know that was his last album, Calvin Owens' last album, before he passed away. I'm almost certain I'm on there, but you know, he made so many albums, and I was on, I think, about 6 of them. And I'm sure Houston is the place to be is one of those that I'm on. So anyway, I just thought I would share that. You guys can click the link, save it, come back here, save it, and listen to it later. All right. Feel free to ask any questions. We're going to go 2 hours today, so we're not in a hurry. Let me see if I've got any comment questions. I don't remember anything coming in. Yeah, I don't see anything. So we don't have any questions to get started with. Let me tell you a little bit about Calvin Owens, who is the leader of that album that I just put in the chat. Calvin was a trumpet player in Houston. There are some other Calvin Owens videos where he's playing live. Let me what am I doing? Let me put some links to some of those. So he's from Houston. I believe that he went on the road with B.B. King. I think he was B.B. King's road manager or music director or something like that. So there's a Wikipedia on Calvin. It says, American blues trumpet player, band leader, and composer. He grew up in Houston's 5th Ward, influenced by Louis Armstrong. Worked with B.B. King, Pete Mays, T-Bone Walker, Amos Milburn, Fathead Newman, Arnett Cobb, all these great players, right? Yeah, this is not a very detailed. There's more to it than that. I'm sure there's pictures of Calvin with with the bus, the BB King bus, and yeah, I'm not seeing that come up online. I saw it. I think it was Calvin that showed it to me. Calvin and I were friends for about 15 years before he passed away. He was a avid supporter of my what do you call it? What do you call it? Newsletter. I had a newsletter in the old days, and he was one of the first people to sign up, and he was always commenting afterwards and stuff like that. Yeah, so I'm not seeing that picture come up anywhere. So yeah, let me show you. So he could also play jazz. There's videos of him playing with a bunch of other. It's a European performance. So like for example, here's a link to him playing I Got Rhythm. Hello, Gabriel. Nice to see you. Gabriel says, hello, Eddie, and congrats for the 200. Unfortunately, a Saturday I'm at work as I finish very late, but I'm listening with the iPhone. Okay. Yeah, I knew some people would have to work when I had to change the time. You know, we used to have Saturdays originally, I think. And yeah, so right now I had to open the Fridays up for students. Cardo, hello Cardo. Cardo says, hi Eddie. Hope you are doing well. Do you think that doing bending strengthens the embouchure? I don't know. Never thought about that. I guess you could say that, right? Uh, when we say bending, well, when we say strengthen, that's not the first thing that comes to my mind as far as why we would do that, right? My objective. Let me answer your question without answering your question. My purpose for doing the lip bends is not strength, so that's why I haven't considered it. My purpose for doing lip bends is to counteract. Okay, maybe there's more than one purpose. To counteract the stiffness that people keep accusing people who free buzz. There is a risk of stiffness that sets in for people who do free buzz. So the people who are anti-free buzz for that reason are not entirely wrong. Okay? Those people are not entirely wrong. There is the risk of stiffness. It doesn't happen all the time, especially in my method, because we don't do a lot of free buzz. But right after the buzzing, we have the long tones and that's where we do the bends. And the bends help you control the openness of the aperture. Let me tell you about that, because, and I know this is a huge tangent, but we've got 2 hours. So I have this pet peeve about people who quit. What do I mean by quit? They quit trying to get a good sound. They quit trying to sound their best because something is uncomfortable, something. So when we talk about the stiffness in the lips that comes from overdoing it, playing too loud, getting too tired, not resting enough. A lot of times these people will say, well, now I can't play and get a good sound. Well, that's just not true. All that is an excuse. All that is an excuse for sucking. You don't have to suck just because you're tired. You don't have to suck just because this gets stiff. So what I like about the bends is the bends give us that ability to control what's going on in the face, even if the lips are stiff. That's to me what that's about. A more abbreviated way to say that would be to say that the lip bends are for aperture control. That's a more precise, abbreviated way of saying what I just said. The lip bends give you aperture control. And if you have aperture control, how much does it matter how stiff your lips are? I hope that makes sense. If you have aperture control, it almost doesn't matter. You're not going to have any issues. Now, let's talk just for, in case some people don't know what this is, the bends we're talking about are when you hold a note, lip it down to a different note, and then back up. One of my favorite lip bend exercises is when you start on the note, lip it down a whole half step, back to the note, lip it down a whole step, back to the note, down a half step, and then back again. That's a very, very nice lip bend exercise, in my opinion. And by the way, yes, I'm doing well, thank you. Hello, Seppo, nice to see you. I got your email, and I was going to respond. I'll respond after this. Sorry about that. Jordan, hello, Jordan, aloha. What do you do when your lip starts getting tired during a gig? Mouthpiece change? Definitely not a mouthpiece change. No. Every time I've done that, my lip swells up and then I can't play. And I know that sounds like it contradicts what I was just talking about. I'm talking about, this is not just stiffness, what I'm talking about now with the mouthpiece. This is actually true inflammation, like someone popped you in the lip. If I change, okay, so when I say that, I'm talking about the rim size. But no, I wouldn't change the mouthpiece. When I get tired on the gig, what I do is I make the oral cavity smaller so that it can compensate for the musculature, right? If the muscles can't do it, you can compensate with a smaller oral cavity. That means biting down on the note a little bit more. That means raising the tongue arch a little bit more. Now, this is what we're talking about here is very subtle stuff, not enough to change the sound. Okay? When you first start experimenting with this stuff, it's going to sound awful. And that's why some people they can't do this stuff, because you stick your toe in the water, it's too cold, and you say, "Oh, I'm not going in." Right? There's a lot of people like that. They don't give it enough time to figure it out. So, but no, what I do is I will change. It's almost like a whole different embouchure, except that it's not an embouchure. It's behind the embouchure. Okay. So we're talking about uh, just barely. It's almost as if I'm playing a minor third higher. And you know what? How I figured this out? One of the ways that I figured this out is that I had a broken tooth one time back here. And when I played loud, especially loud and high, it put pressure on that nerve. And I just had to, in the time that I had to learn how to rechannel that air so it wouldn't go on there. Imagine that, right? You know, as a trumpet player, if this is what you do to pay the bills, you can't just go to the dentist whenever you feel like going to the dentist, because it's going to be days of not playing after they pull a tooth like that. This tooth was cracked. It was cracked vertically so that the nerve was exposed, and there was no way for them to save the tooth. And I had to figure out how to channel the air around the tooth. Well, by doing that kind of a manipulation, I figured out, this is very similar to the story that you hear about other famous trumpet players. And I'm not saying I'm a famous trumpet player, but there's famous stories about people who had to figure out a different way to play. And I think when it comes to that sort of thing, I think there's two different kinds of people. You have people who quit, and then you have people who will figure out how to make it work. I think most people quit. Bottom line, just based on my anecdotal experience, based on looking at what I've seen in students, what I've seen on the gigs with other people, I think most, and when I say most, I mean a mathematical most, more than half of the people out there are the type of people that would quit when things don't go the way they normally expect them to go. So because of the tooth stuff I've had, and because of other issues, like, for example, there was that one time that I popped myself in the mouth. I think I told you guys about this not long ago, but I don't mind repeating it here. I was on a gig, and the band was in a balcony, and the horns were off to the left and kind of separate from the band, and the two of us were joking around. Because we're upstairs, nobody can see us, right? And we're cutting jokes and all that kind of stuff. And then I realized we're about to play, and I go pop, and I pop myself in the mouth, and the lip goes like that. I had to play, so that happened to me bad 2 times, and I sometimes I get the 2 stories mixed up, because there's that one time where I put it up too fast and popped myself in the mouth, and there's the other time when it happened in a recording session. If you do something like that, and this is how you pay your bills, you have no choice but to find some way to make it work. My lip had swollen up so much. You find some way to make that work. So I know I'm still talking about Jordan. Jordan Lopez says hello. I didn't say your name last time. I apologize about that. He says, "What do you do when you get tired on the gig?" You find a way to make it work. It almost has to be an individual thing. You have to find what works for you, but there is no reason to stop just because you're tired. I like to, within the lessons, I like to compare it to long distance running. And I'm a bad example for long distance running because, when I would get past like the 10-mile mark, I would start slouching over, and no matter, that's the time when you shouldn't slouch because you're going to do damage to your body. And so yeah, when I look at the people who run properly, I'm not using myself as an example in the running. I'm looking at the guys who actually do this. And no matter how tired they get, they still have proper form. No matter how tired they get, they're still, they're all the structural stuff is still in place. It doesn't matter how tired they are. They're still, it's not that they're still going. I think a lot of people, that's what they admire. Oh, look at this guy. He's still going. He's still going, right? No, the guy is still upright and has the right posture and the right step and the right gait and all this stuff. That's the beauty of the long distance stuff, is that they've got so much control over what's happening here that even when it becomes so terribly uncomfortable and painful and they are exhausted, they still have that proper form. We call it form, right? I think that's a pretty accepted term. And I think the same thing happens with musicians. The people who keep going, they find a way to make that work. They still get a good sound. They still get good phrasing, good sight reading. What I see in the lessons a lot of times is that people will get tired and then everything else goes out the window, right? They get tired and they start making sight reading mistakes. When in reality, how tired they are here should not affect here. But what we see is this state in their mind where everything's now falling apart because I think maybe what they hang their hat on, that hook that they hang their hat on, is gone. That might be a terrible analogy. What they anchor themselves to is now gone. When they have that discomfort, when they have that pain, they lose touch with what keeps them going in the first place. And so now everything's gone. And what I was telling my student earlier today is that a lot of people, there's people who, and maybe this isn't as true as it used to be. My orchestral studies were in the 80s. So that's a long time since. But there are people that back in the 80s, there were people who used to live by the rule, never practice tired, always play fresh. And to me, that's sort of like first of all, who can play like that? If you never embrace that fatigue, what are you going to do when it's thrust upon you? And now you have no skills to deal with it. So I'm not a believer in never practice tired. I'm not a believer in that at all. Not at all. What if now you're a slave to your feelings? That's what happens, at least from my perspective. I- If you never practice tired, what happens when you have no choice but to play tired? I've seen it so many times. People fall apart. It's not just their chops. Everything falls apart because they're tired. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on so much about that, but that's my thing. You know, you a lot of that stuff. What do you do about it? It's got to be personal. Maybe it might be a mouthpiece change. I know people that do that. I'm not a big fan of that. Um, but really, you just got to find. You know, here's the thing: if you're not getting tired in your practice sessions, you're not going to know what to do when it happens at the gig. Let's put it that way. If you're not getting, if this isn't part of your weekly, I say weekly because I don't believe in this every day. Okay, you should only get tired twice a week. I mean the level of fatigue that I'm talking about. The way I teach, if you read the one range book, um, I'm very deep into that. Only 2 days a week. The other 4 days, yeah, the other 4 days are lower level practice. Okay, but if I can't even imagine life like that. You know, for so long, my practice sessions were so much more demanding than anything I ever played on a gig. The gigs always seemed kind of like too easy for me because I was pushing myself so hard in the practice times. And yes, part of that was the endurance. Anyway, hello, Sean. Sean says, I was listening to an interview with Ingrid Jensen, and she said that when she was learning jazz, all she cared about was learning to work through the changes. Can you talk about what that means? Um, Now, I don't know what that means to her. Uh, you know, I'm very careful about how I do these Q and A's. Um, there is a jazz trumpet culture, and I'm not part of it. I don't want to be part of it. I don't worship um, the 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 trumpet heroes, um, and I don't pretend to understand what those heroes think, what they believe. Okay, so now the changes are the chords of the song. So, like if I'm playing all of me, so if I'm playing that and I'm improvising, um, that wasn't very good, but I did play the chords of that song. Now, my way of approaching chords is I prefer to approach the chords through the language, not through arpeggios and scales. Arpeggios and scales sound like arpeggios and scales, and it's not very musical. I can't tell you what Ingrid Jensen is thinking, doing, or trying to do. That's not what I'm about. Okay, I will never. Um, and I'm not. I'm saying that in both directions. I'm saying that in the sense that I'm not saying anything good about her or anything bad about her. It's either way. I can't speak for her. Okay. Also, I listened to an interview with Terrell Stafford, and he said he could not make it without a daily routine. So thank you so much for what you do and creating routines that are plug and play. Well, you're welcome. And yes, they are plug and play. That's what I meant when I wrote the second book. The first book, I don't mind telling you guys about that. The first book was The Physical Trumpet Pyramid. And when I wrote that book, it was actually meant for my students at the time. And I wanted them to craft their own routines. And that didn't work. And it was actually a kind of a eye opener for me, uh, figuring out that it's not that they weren't smart enough or anything like that. It's they weren't interested enough, right? It's it was just way too much for them for how much they wanted to play. You know. So anyway, I immediately once the physical trumpet pyramid had flopped, as far as I was concerned, that original now the current physical trumpet pyramid is a third edition. I don't know if I ever say that in the book itself, but I rewrote that book twice. Um, I have a friend that calls it the owner's manual or the teacher's manual. Um, but the daily routines was my answer to that flop. The daily routines was the answer to that failure. And then the other routines that I've written since then are just variations of that first routine. So, and yes, the whole point was to make it so that nobody had to understand it. You just do it and you get the benefit. Seppo says, I have been thinking about buying a budget same brand educator mouthpiece kit for helping my students to pick the best one for all round playing as well as lead playing. Which mouthpiece types would you suggest to choose for that? Um, I don't know who else has them. Uh, I have right here a Warburton kit that I bought about 2 years ago. And what's nice about it is that I've been buying other parts to add to it. And so you have the top part and the bottom part, and you put them together. You get all these different combinations. Um, I've got some that I've lent out right now. I like to let the students try. I like I like to let them to try the different sizes for a while, like 2 weeks at a time. I don't make them like buy whatever it is that they've got right now here. So, but that's the only brand I know that has this. So I wouldn't, other than Warburton, I wouldn't know what else to tell you. What Warburton has is I think this one was about $3,000. Um, you can get a smaller kit or a bigger kit. They have different sizes you can buy. So, but it's a beautiful tool. I think when you have these kits, it helps you really do a better job at finding the right mouthpiece for that student. It's a lot better. It's like going to a shoe store almost. Um, Yeah. Any other questions? So I do hope you check out the links I put in here for Calvin Owens. That first link, I'm almost sure I played on. I'm pretty sure. What? Gabriel says Warburton is very good. Seppo says Warburton does not have the kit available anymore. Which parts of the kit would be the most useful and how many should I include? Let's see here. That's a surprise to me. A big surprise to me. Wow. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Yeah, I'm looking at the website. I don't see. That's disappointing. I hope that they haven't stopped that. Gabriel says the problem is that they are all very comfy and it's hard to choose one. You know, I actually do have a series of steps that I take the students through to help them figure out what the right mouthpiece is. And it's very structured. And so you're right. What do you do if you're going by feel or emotions or something not tangible? That can be a problem with the mouthpieces, right? Because you're now, um, you know, you can spend all that time looking for a mouthpiece, and then in the end, you end up with something that's no better than what you've been using already, right? So, yeah, I have a set system. We do certain exercises in a certain order, uh, and find it that way. Jordan says, "Thank you for the excellent guidance and great stories." Well, you're welcome. Gabriel says, "I've got a little 6-piece mouthpiece from them, but I can't pick one because they are all very good and I'm confused." So, what are your 6 different pieces? What do you have? I just bought a pouch today. Well, actually, it came in today. Uh, for 3 mouthpieces. I always have 3 mouthpieces on the gig, but I've been carrying them around in um, 3 separate holders. So this just came in today. I'm looking forward to the next gig where I have it all in one pouch. Any other questions? Oh, that's right. You told me you were at work. Yeah, so Gabriel says it's hard to type. He's on the phone. The rim is always very comfortable. Well, that's a big part of it, right? You want to have a rim that's, to me, because of my teeth structure, it has to feel good when I put it on there. I've had students that it doesn't matter to them. The rim size doesn't matter because they've got these like almost like digitally created teeth, and they can put the mouthpiece anywhere and have any mouthpiece size, and it doesn't matter to them. My teeth aren't like that. Anybody else? Any other questions? Seppo says, how do you teach the plunger technique to your students? Well, let me tell you this first. I don't teach the way it should be taught. So I'll tell you how I do it first, and then I'll tell you how it really should be. Now, as always with everything else, the listening should be the most important thing. So you want to listen to the guys that do that. Okay, does that make sense? I would very strongly recommend, let me put a link here. My friend Barry Lee Hall has a recording on YouTube where he's playing Swinging Shepherd Blues. Now, let me tell you about Barry Lee. Barry Lee was, as a young man, he was the trumpet player for Duke Ellington. And when Mercer Ellington passed away, Barry Lee took over the band. So, and then after a while, Barry says he's moving back to Houston. That's how I got to know him. I'm looking for this link real quick. Here it is. So that's the first thing you want to do is listen. Now, I got comfortable. When I say that I don't do it the way you're supposed to, I got comfortable with a small plunger, like a sink size plunger. Let me grab it real quick. I got so comfortable with the sink size plunger, I can't play with the other size. So if you look at the plunger that Barry's using, it's not a sink plunger, it's a toilet plunger. So this is not the proper size. This is not the right one. So yes, I said do the listening. And of course, Barry's not the only guy that you can listen to. Then I'll teach them the technique where it's like a hinge, right? We're not going in or out like this. We're not doing that. We're doing more like a hinge, opening and closing the door. Right? We're doing more like that. Okay. And so what we're looking for is to create more of a human sound. So, it's kind of hard to come up with rules about when to open it, when to close it. Well, right now I'm talking about improv. If you have markings on the music, that's a different art. So it'll have plunger with a O and a plus sign. The plus sign means that it's closed. The O means that it's open. But yes, to me, and the other thing is the growling. I don't do a real growl. Okay, I can't. I have a coughing fit every single time. Every time I do a genuine growl, it irritates my sinuses and my throat so badly that I have a coughing fit for the next 40 minutes. So I use flutter tongue instead of growling. So when I do I'm actually just flutter tonguing. I'm not growling. And I can hear the difference between a flutter tongue and a growl. It's better if they can growl. What is the growling? The growling is when you do that, right, from back here. No, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to demonstrate it. But yes, so, the thing is it's not that hard to teach it because it is a human thing. And once they learn the mechanics, when there's not much to that, once they learn the mechanics, knowing when to open and close is a very natural thing. Yeah, so anyway, Gabriel says, Eddie, I have a question that I've always wanted to ask. Why is jazz called jazz? Okay. That's a good question. Let me tell you what I've been told, and I have to always give the same warning because there's so much that I was taught before the internet that ended up not being true. So there's two kinds of truth, right? When it comes to stuff like this, there's actual truth, and then there's the legend. And the legend isn't any less true. That makes me sound like a liberal, right? There are times when that kind of speech is actually more true than other times. So we don't all have our own truth, that kind of thing. I don't believe that. Okay. However, when stuff that is cultural, that has been around for so long, and that many millions of people have been influenced by that, it doesn't matter how untrue it is, there's still an element of cultural truth to it. Okay, so I just have to say that before I answer the question. Okay. Jazz, this is what I was told. I'm saying it in the third person, okay? This is how I was told. Jazz was the equivalent, the word jazz, when jazz first came out, was the equivalent to our F word today. Let that sink in. This is what I was told. Jazz, the word jazz, was the equivalent 150 years ago to our F word today. So if we were to say today, I'm going to F something up, they used to say, I'm going to jazz something up. It was the exact same word. It was a cuss word. Okay? And it was a reference to uh, sexual activity. But it was, so what I was taught was that it was used in the same way that we use the F word today. So imagine if we had a style of music today that came out called the F word. I don't cuss, so I'm not going to say that. Imagine how controversial that would be. No wonder that the people for almost 100 years said that jazz was the devil's music. No wonder. Not only was it born in the brothels and that kind of atmosphere, but it was also had a name that was a forbidden word. Now, how much of this is true? We don't know. That's the problem with all this stuff. But if you look at culturally what jazz, where jazz started, how it is today, what the spirit of jazz is and what the spirit of jazz is not, you can kind of put all of that together and say, you know what, whether it's true or not, that legend has some meaning. And it would even still have meaning if later someone came out and proved that it wasn't true. It would still have meaning. I hope that makes sense. So yes, that's how it became, because if you read any of the history, and maybe history is the wrong word, if you read the old articles when jazz first came out, the old newspaper articles and stuff, oh man, the jazz people were so, jazz musicians, I'm not talking about the Dixieland stuff, I'm talking about that earliest jazz. The earliest jazz stuff, like the first few years, it was extremely in your face, offensive, trying to get a reaction out of people. So the name itself was meant to cause a reaction, an emotional reaction. That's what I was told. Okay. To me, there's some people that will say, like the personality stuff. There's a guy on YouTube that had a personality channel, and then he found out, and he's a Christian, and he found out that the guy who started all of this stuff with the personality things was an atheist. And now, because the source of that was atheism, he's no longer into the personalities. That's like saying, I don't have two hands. I don't have 10 fingers. It's a ridiculous. Just because just because some atheist had 10 fingers, I don't have 10 fingers anymore. Just because some atheist said, "Oh, I don't, I believe we all have 10 fingers," well, now I'm not allowed to say that I have 10 fingers. What? I mean, that makes no sense, right? So it's the same thing with the music stuff. Um, there are people that say, well, if that's the background and the root of the music, then it's evil. Well, no, it's not evil. If you're gonna think like that, then everything you do in this life is evil. Because there's very few things in life that you can't find some evil lurking in there somewhere. So jazz today is a art form, and you can make it mean whatever you want it to mean. There's Christian jazz. So I just learned about a Christian jazz group from my wife's cousin, who says he's doing a project where he wants to um, resuscitate a bunch of this music from that group. It's like a fusion group, a Christian fusion group. And yeah, so anyway, moving on. Seppo says, I have always been wondering how the full sound drops are done. Do you have experience on how they sound that full on recordings and how they sound in practice room? So, we talked about that a little bit before. Um, what people sound like in their recordings is largely up to the technology. I'm not saying that they can make someone who sounds terrible sound good. Well, they can do that too. What I mean is, the guys who are really, really great players are really, really great players. But I can tell you this, you can take the best trumpet player in the world and put them in the same studio as I'm in, and you won't be able to tell the difference. So it does have to do with the EQ. It has to do with the compression. And it has to do with mic placement. It has to do with the size of the room and the shape of the room and whether or not they've got carpet or tile and stuff like that. There's so much stuff that goes into that. There's a producer that I used to work with. Let me see if I can find him. Oh, what's his name? He passed away during COVID, I think. Bob Gallarza. He produced let me find a track that I'm on. He produced a bunch of famous recordings. Okay, I don't see. Okay, I'm on Full Circle. Oh, here's Pride and Passion. That's a good one. Here's a link to an album that I'm on with Bob Gallarza. And the reason I'm sharing that is when I recorded with him, I was in a small cubicle. Now, this wouldn't be that full sound that you're talking about, but I'm telling you that the way these guys record is more geared towards technology than it is towards actual techniques that we have now. Okay, so that said, there are recording techniques that fall on our shoulders. And one of the things I learned early on is that I have to imagine in the room, because it doesn't, all that's, let me tell you this too. That sound that you're talking about is not the sound we're hearing in our heads when we're playing. So let's get that clear too. So here I am sitting in the studio and I'm playing into the microphone's feeding back, and I can hear through the microphone into the headphones my own sound. If I were to compare that link that I just put on the chat, if I were to compare what I heard in my headphones and what this sounds like now, it's not the same trumpet. So the three things that I pointed out so far are EQ, compression, and mic placement. Now, when I was recording this recording, the mic placement was right there. So the mic is literally right here because the room is so tiny. And so there's no choice but to have the mic right there on the bell. So any sense that this is a trumpet player in the band, back on stage or whatever, that has to be created digitally, because the signal that they're working with is right there, coming right out of the bell. So they have to change. Now, there's more to it than just those three things, but those are the three big ones. Sean says, do you like listening to all forms of jazz, or are there any jazz artists that you don't really care for? Someone at church asked me that same question, but in a more general way. I have the same feelings about jazz that I do for all kinds of music. To me, what matters most is the message. If it's a hateful, ugly message, I'm not interested. See, I don't worship trumpet. I don't worship trumpet heroes. I don't worship jazz heroes. I don't worship music. I don't worship jazz. I don't worship classical music. I don't worship any of this stuff. I worship God. So as someone who worships God, my behavior towards the jazz, towards the music, towards the trumpet is different from those people who worship those things. And I know that's kind of controversial. The people who actually worship those things will not say to you, oh, I worship the trumpet. They won't say that. They won't say, oh, I worship jazz. But these people are more zealous about this stuff than most Christians are about church. That can't be denied. So when I listen to music, it's because I'm allowing somebody at that moment to communicate with me. It's the same thing with novels. It's the same thing with TV programs. When I choose to listen to a piece of music, I am allowing that person or people, right? Because we're talking about the person who wrote the music and we're talking about the person who's performing the music. I'm allowing those people to communicate with me. If someone keeps communicating with me in a way that is hateful or ugly, why would I keep listening? I'm not going to listen. If it's bluegrass, I'll listen to bluegrass. If it's uh, blues, I'll listen to blues. But if it's hateful, then I'm not interested. I don't want to give that part of my life to that emotion. It's hard enough as it is to love people without having that hatred front and center in my life like that. So no, that's how I feel about it. Gabriel asks, Eddie, do you change mouthpiece when you switch B flat to C? I have not in the past. Would I now today? Uh, if now that I have a kit, I probably would change today since I have a kit now to find what would be the best mouthpiece for that horn. Um, but no, in the past I never did that. I don't have a C right now, so I wouldn't be able to give you an answer that way. So Seppo says if we would had a full sound drop from the first letter A, how would you finger it to seem it sound like long glissando? Is that what you were talking about earlier? So I wasn't sure what you meant by full sound drops. Are you talking about falls? You know, the terminology for this stuff is not consistent. So are you talking about a fall? So what I teach my students about the falls is that we have three types, and it depends on what we're trying to do, right? So if it's a long fall, almost always it's going to be half valve. Right? If it's long, we're going to go to a half valve to make it fall that way. Um, so we have the half valve, we have the lip fall, which is almost always just a short fall. It's just like a real fast lip slur. And then the other one is a finger fall. And all three of those is a legitimate fall. Some people call it a fall off. So what do you mean by full size drop? Is that a full sound drop? Is that what you're talking about is a fall? So the way I would do the A So notice that the first thing I do is lift up the fingers. So I do, the position I'm looking for is 1/3, about half, and 2/3 here. So 1/3, half, and 2/3, like that. So I didn't realize what you were talking about. I misunderstood you on. I thought you were talking about how to get a full sound. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, so I do that finger position. Gabriel says, why did you choose the trumpet? Was there anyone in your family playing it? Nope, nobody playing in my family. My father was a drummer, but he stopped playing long before I was born. My mom sang in the choir. Now, it was just assumed that we would all be in band just because my father made it that big of a deal. And so my brother played in band, my sister played in band, my other brother was in choir. So we were all involved with music. Why did I choose trumpet? For me, I remember liking the trombone and liking the trumpet. But I chose the trumpet because this is a funny thing. The trombone player, I thought the trombone players were swallowing the slide. So I'm like in 4th grade or something like that, right? And they're moving the slide in and out, and my thought was, how in the world do they swallow that slide like that? I thought the slide was going in their mouths and down. So I chose trumpet. I'm kind of glad I didn't choose trombone. That's a whole different universe. That's a whole different universe. But yeah, to me, it came down to trumpet or trombone. Now, let me tell you this before, because that sounds like the whole story. My father used to test us, especially me. Used to test me. We would listen to the recordings, and he'd say, that soloist there, what instrument is that? That soloist, what instrument is that? That soloist, what is that? And I got to where I could recognize the sound of the different instruments long before I ever chose the trumpet. So I was drawn to the brass instruments. Never had that, what, most people like the saxophone and the drums and stuff like that. I never had that. For me, the trumpet, and it's maybe because my father was an avid big band listener, and the trumpet was the king of the big band. So I always heard trumpet music. I could, distinguish trumpet music probably when I was in kindergarten. Hello, Adrian. Adrian says, are you working on the jazz etudes yet? Now, let me say, yes, I am. I've got They're on the desk sitting here right now. Um, I don't, it's not guaranteed that I'll be the one that writes them. Uh, Lots of people send etudes in. I've just been very blessed that they've chosen mine so many times over the last 10, 15 years, something like that. So it's not 100% for sure that the etudes will be mine. Okay. Maybe this year someone else will submit and they'll be better than mine, and they'll be, or maybe they want to have something different. Who knows? I can tell you this, I'm not real excited about doing it this year, but I've been working on it. I've got, I think, 1.5 etudes done for so far. I don't mind telling you which tunes. Well, you needn't, right? Well, you needn't. Thelonious Monk. And then the other one is A Child is Born. Supple asks, do I have a book available based on chromatic scales? I don't think so. There is a chromatic section in the let's see, in the band scale expansion studies. So the very last part of this book is the chromatic scale section. Now I do have chromatic stuff sprinkled throughout, and that's actually a very good book idea, right? I could take all of the chromatic stuff, put it into one book. That's an idea. That wouldn't take too long to do. I would just have to take, all the etudes, all the duets, all the I have solos that are primarily chromatic. Yeah. And then all the different exercises. That would be a great idea. I should write that down. Thank you. But no, nothing as of yet. I'm going to write that down. I've got a lot of chromatic material. Gabriel says, have you ever tried the Vasuti intermediate etudes on his book 3? I sight read them. I don't remember much about them. I don't want to sound like I'm, let me tell you this, right? I'm from El Paso. I know this is a tangent, but I want to set the stage here so people understand where I'm coming from, right? I'm from El Paso. We have great Mexican food in El Paso. Well, there's some Tex-Mex too, but it's Mexican food in El Paso. It's right on the border. I have my certain places I like to go. But yeah, Mexican food. So one time I played a gig for the people that owned uh, Ninfas. Ninfas is a Tex-Mex restaurant in Houston, and it's a high end for that kind of food. It's pretty high end. And instead of paying us, now this is not how I normally operate, but the band decided as a group that they would do this, and so I went in with them. The band decided that we would get paid in vouchers for the food instead of being paid in cash. So later, I went to Ninfas and with some people, and they said, Eddie, do you like this? And my answer was, and I was less skilled back then. Okay, I was less skilled verbally speaking at saying what I meant, and I said, this is not Mexican food. This is Tex-Mex. That's what I said. Do you like this? Oh, this is Mexican. This is not Mexican food. It's Tex-Mex. As Tex-Mex goes, it's some of the best food you can get. But it's not Mexican food. So if I'm hungry for Mexican food, I'm not going to go to Ninfas. Okay? Does that make sense? A lot of people can't process that, and it makes them angry. To me, in my head, it's not that something is good or bad. I have compartments where everything has to fit. Here's Mexican food. Here's Tex-Mex. It's not the same. There's some overlapping. There's some similarities, but it's not the same. And so the Vizzuti etudes and the Vizzuti duets, because you got duets in there too, right? Fall in a category, and I'm not going to say what it is because people get offended by that too. To me, it's not offensive. And I've written stuff like that too. It's just I don't, when I compose, I'm composing stuff that's communicating my feelings, my, you know what I mean? My ideas and stuff. So, this is my way of saying I enjoy doing those etudes. I enjoy doing that kind of stuff as a challenge because it's different, but it doesn't resonate with me. So, like when I say if I'm hungry for Mexican food, I'm not going to go to Ninfas. If I'm hungry for Tex-Mex, I'll go to Ninfas. So when I want to sit and play a really nice etude, that's not where I'm going to go. I'm not putting it down. I'm not saying Alan Vizzuti's, it's not a criticism. It's a categorization. When I'm hungry for this, I'm not going to go for that. Okay? And so, yes, probably me saying that probably makes it worse. I don't know. That's kind of funny, right? The more you dig in, the more embarrassing it gets. I'm very, very, I'm very uncomfortable talking about other people, other people's work, other people, their successes, their failures, and stuff like that, because it's so easy for it to sound like a criticism. And when you have, why it's like that, and I'm not accusing any of you guys of this. But when you have hero worshipers, when you have trumpet worshipers, when you have music worshipers, when you have people who worship what we do instead of it just being an art form, those people get greatly bent out of shape. Anything you say that's different from what they say offends them. Does that make sense? Anything that you say that doesn't align with what they say is offensive. So Gabriel says, I often talk about how Vizzuti is a good player. I got the Etudes book, and it seems to me very interesting. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's a great book. That's what I'm trying to say. It's very difficult for me to say what I really mean. I have the books. I bought them. I paid for them. And I do recommend. I think it's good that you bought them too. So what do I think are so Gabriel also asked what's a good book of classic etudes that can be more resonant. Now when I say more resonant, I mean more resonant to me, what I enjoy to play. Okay. I like the Goldman book. I'm a big fan of the Goldman book. I don't remember the title of it. Let me see. Edwin Franklin Goldman. It's available on Q Press. Oh my. Why is nobody selling the book anymore? I wonder if it's public domain now. Here's a free. Huh. That's funny. Anyway, I like the Goldman book. I like for the more modern stuff, there's the Gates odd meter etudes. That's kind of nice. And you know what else I like is there's an etude book written by Brahms. And the funny thing about that is there's a lot of people that don't like it. I like it. Talking about that resonance thing, that book resonates with me. How weird is that, right? But that's typical, right? Because I'm my own person, I'm not caught up in the trumpet worship. I'm not caught up in the music worship. I'm not caught up in hero worship. I don't let other people decide for me what I like and what I don't like. That's why when people say, like when Seppo says, how do they do this in America? Well, I don't know. I'm not into that. I'm not into that. I'm not into that worship of those people and that music and stuff like that. So I'll tell you what, Gabriel, I can make a list of my favorite etude books. And if you email me, I'll send you the list. Maybe I'll publish it. I don't know. I'm writing a note to myself. I have a lot of favorites, actually. Seppo asks, do I give only private lessons or do you teach groups as well? So I do teach groups, I just don't call them lessons, right? So I do clinics, I do master classes, I do workshops, I do sectionals. Now we do less of that online, but it's still possible. I have done online group things before. What they do, and I've seen it from the other side, what they do is they have the room set up. They have a TV, like kind of like what I have here, right? Except it's a much bigger TV. And then they have the webcam on top of the TV. So I don't know if I've shown you guys this before. My setup right here is that I have a TV mounted on the wall. My webcam is on top of the TV, and then beneath the TV, I have another computer monitor set to the same computer. So it's very similar to what the bands that I've seen that do this group stuff. Gabriel says, why don't I write some classical resonant etude book together with the chromatic stuff? Let me tell you what I've been thinking about. You know, I'm 60 now, and I've got this stack of inspirations. I don't know if I've told you guys about the inspirations. I have inspirations during the day. I'll be walking around, and God will put a melody in my head. Why do I think God did this? Because this melody has never existed before. Where am I getting it? I don't think I'm not that creative. All of my creativity comes from God. So I call them inspirations. I write them down. And I'm 60 and I'm getting more inspirations than I can write compositions. So I thought maybe what I need to do is just start writing a bunch of etude books based on these inspirations, right? Wouldn't that be really cool? Huh? So yes, I know you're kind of sort of joking, but I think that's something I would love to do. Just sit down and write, a different etude book for each level of my system. Sean says, I've listened to podcasts and supposedly they can listen to music and know who is playing. Miles, Morgan, Dizzy, etc. If I can't, does that mean I'm not listening enough? If I can't recognize who those players are, does that mean I'm not listening enough? Let's say yes. Huh? Let's say yes. Let's say yes. But I can't always tell either. So, you know, this goes back to the worship stuff again, right? This is why did I say let's just say yes? Because you should be doing more listening. There's never too much listening. I should be doing more listening. Everybody watching this should be doing more listening. Okay? And yes, the listening should be leading towards our abilities to discern certain things that most people who don't listen can't discern, including who might the players be. But is that some sort of standard we should hold ourselves to? Like, you're not a jazz player until you can do this? That's where the worship stuff comes in. I'm very opposed to that. There's players who are great players that don't know anything about what mouths sound like. I refuse to be part of that. I'm sorry. Yes, do the listening, but not because they're so great. And the listening thing can be an act of worship. I know people get bent out of shape over this stuff. The listening thing can be an act of worship. If your head is not in the right place, if you're not thinking, so you know how the listening has always been for me? I know that if he could do that, so can I. If the if the listening is the other way of listening, oh, listen to that great player who's so far beyond me, I'll never achieve what he's got. I'll never be what he is, but maybe if I worship him by listening enough, maybe I can be at least halfway decent. That's worship. My listening has always been from that perspective of, look at what that guy is doing. I want to do that. How do I do that? What notes is he playing? How is he inflecting the notes? I like what he's doing. I want to do that. But if you're listening from a perspective that you'll never be able to do that these people are so far beyond what you'll ever be capable of doing, then that's worship. That's hero worship. And I have never been. There's people who say, Eddie, you're lying. I remember that you used to blah, blah, blah. No. In the past, I would say I like this guy more than that guy. I like that guy more than this guy. I never said, oh, I'll never be as good as this guy. I remember telling you guys on the Q and A a long time ago, when I was in college, what my goal was. I wanted to have Wynton Marsalis's sound. I loved his sound. I wanted to have Alan Vazuti's range and technique. I wanted to have Freddie Hubbard's harmonic control. Those were my three models. I never saw any of that as being beyond my reach. I never saw that as being something, I never saw them as being otherworldly, inaccessible. I never saw that way. Seppo says there seems to be availability problems also with other books. For example, I have been searching for the Rubank trumpet trios with piano accompaniment. I can get that to you, I think. I think I have those. Seems that they are not available anymore anywhere. I have already questioned the national libraries for them. Can you tell me where I should go to find this music? I'm not sure, but I think I have those. I'll look I might not be. I might be thinking of something else, but I might have those. Um, there is a company that that lends music. It's like a trumpet music library. Just typing trumpet music library for lending. There's Brian Shook. Now he's got solos, but there are places that you can borrow. You can borrow these and then send them back. Anyway, that's something I would look into. There are borrowing places where you borrow the music physically. They send you the physical book, and then you send it back when you're done with it. So that's something worth looking into. If you give me titles, send me an email with titles in them, and I can help look that way. I would also recommend this. Try a different search engine. Okay? If you're using online stuff, I think Google, something's changed with Google. And where you used to get thousands, when you used to get thousands of results, Google was only sending 2 or 3 pages. So they did something to change. They think all the rest of it's not relevant. But what if what you're looking for, Google doesn't understand? So yes, that's a problem. Gabriel says, no, it's not a joke. As Vuzuri is interesting but very technical, while your music is resonant to me too. In fact, I often play your hymns like it would be etudes. Oh, that's great. I appreciate that. So yes, I've held back on writing etude books. Remember I told you guys a few years back, a few months back, that I don't like writing stuff that's already written. When I write a composition, it's because that idea I had for that composition doesn't exist already. In whatever way that I'm approaching it, right? And the etude books, you know, don't get me wrong, I've got etude books. I do have 2 etude books. One's a Go with the Flow is an etude book. Actually, more like 3 etude books. Go with the Flow. The All-State Prep book is an etude book, and the one with the mouse on the cover, 20 Studies, I think is what I called it. And maybe part of the reason why. So let me tell you about 20 Studies. I wrote those etudes for myself. I wrote them so that I could improve certain aspects of my playing. And I didn't want to publish them. And I have a ex-teacher who was so enthusiastic about my books, and I don't want this to sound like I'm bashing him or anything, because I'm not. I still greatly appreciate everything he ever did for me. But he kept telling me, get that A2 book finished, get that A2 book finished, get that. And I didn't want to write it. And I don't know. I'm not real happy with that book. And anyway, so because it's not like the rest of the books, I don't see what purpose it fills. All the other stuff, all the other books I've published have such a laser sharp focus to them. And that book is just an A2 book. And so for me to publish A2 books, there would have to be something that I could give the public that is better than just that. I don't want it to just be an etude book. I want it to, if I do write etudes, I want them to be in some way remarkable. I don't mean better, by the way. I'm not saying better than other etude books. That's not how I think. I already explained that. Okay? Like I'm not saying if I wrote an etude book that they would be better than Vizuti's. I don't even think that way. The only time I would maybe think that way is when you say better for what? For what purpose? And yes, there would definitely be, if I did write a series of A2 books, there would definitely be a time when his etudes would be more appropriate than my etudes, and therefore, in that context, better. But yeah, still, I'm not going to just write a book just to write a book. I have so many great ideas with that laser sharp focus that I'm talking about. That no, I can't just do that. But this idea about taking all these inspirations that I have, I'm looking down there because that's where I keep them. Taking those and now expanding them into etudes. Now it's not really an etude book, but a collection of inspirations straight from God. That's not the same thing. That's not the same thing. So I would call it an etude book only because what else would I call it? They wouldn't be technically etudes. They would be expressions, musical expressions based on snippets that God gave me when I was going about my daily life. I hope that makes sense. But Gabriel, I'm honored that you feel that way about my music. I appreciate it. Yeah, I really am. So I actually have a list of books I want to write, and this is no joke, really. Every time I cross a book off of that list, I replace it with 2 or 3 other books that I want to write. So, yeah. All right. Any other questions? I'm starting to get hoarse. Any other questions? I'm going to go outside and do some gardening. We've got some cold weather right after some hot weather, and I want to put some seeds in the ground. These are some seeds I just bought, but there's other seeds that I want to put. I've got long, thin cane pepper. okra, a different kind of okra, and then serrano chilies. Gonna put these in the in the ground today. I have others. I've got some milkweed I want to plant, stuff like that. Simple asks, how is your relationship to folk music? I love folk music. I don't know what you mean by a relationship. Um, you know, um, someone who comes on here every once in a while, Raimo often sends me Finnish folk music. I love it too. And you know what I like? Right, so he'll send me this video, and it's got like 5 older gentlemen with the violins, and they're like totally dead faced, right? And this is what they look like. But the music that comes out is so alive. And to me, it's a breath of fresh air to see people who are not going, like they have to convince me that they're that how far into it they are, right? That's what it does to me, right? When I see people moving around like this, that just means to me that they don't believe that their music can communicate without their movement. So when I see these guys that Raimo sends playing like this with no expression, oh, it's a breath of fresh air. I love it. I love it. And there's people from all over the world that send me their videos, right? For a long time, someone in Romania was sending me his church stuff. And same thing, right? The oboist isn't going, right? There's none of that theatrics. And that's what I like. It's real music from real people, not to try to make money, but to actually express who they are and where they're from and that kind of stuff. It's just gorgeous. There's hardly anything in the world that can make such a impactful, have such an impact on your emotions than people playing. What is folk music? They're saying basically our music, right? And maybe I feel that way because of the way I grew up, because we didn't live in one spot. So when we were in Germany, we listened to German music. When we were in the Hawaii, we listened to Asian music. We listened, you know what I mean? Uh, we went and experienced the culture of where we were. And to me, you cannot separate the value of the people from the value of their culture, from the value of their music. I often listen to German music. I often listen to Macedonian music. I often listen to Spanish, South American. I love to, because I told you earlier that the music I listen to, that if it has an evil message, I'm not interested. This stuff is when music is from their heart, they don't have to sell it. They don't have to convince anybody to buy it. You know, um, it's not part of Dog Eat Dog World. So yes, I love folk music. Sean asks, when will all your chops be completed? Any ideas? Well, let me tell you the problem with the chops books. Because of my health, and I'm not going to tell you what's going on with my health, but because of the health stuff, I have taken a break from high notes. Okay. Um, and I always write those etudes, playing them. I mean, not etudes. I always write those books, playing them myself. I have to relearn how to play the high notes, and then I can write the book. So it's not going to be anytime soon. It's not that I can't play the high notes, it's I have to learn to play them differently. Um, and I'm getting there. It's just, yeah. So, but that's what's holding that up. I could the first one. So only two missing are the first and the last. I've got and the first one is already done. I practice it quite often. It's the Trumpet Chops Pioneer. That book is done. I just have to publish it. So the only one that's not technically done is the Trumpet Chops Virtuoso, and I haven't even started on that yet. And I apologize to everybody about that. So that's what's holding that back. I could get the only reason I haven't published the Chops Pioneer book is because it's not that different from the other books. So Seppo says, I personally love the Serbian folk brass music heard from, example, the Gucha Festival. Yeah, I listen to that stuff quite often. I love it. Ara, hello Ara, nice to see you. Eddie, thank you for your contribution to the TJEA etudes. Looking forward to the next ones. Which method book do you find yourself using most often? Um, I stopped using method books myself. When I was using other people's books, I was using the Sigmund Herring 32 etudes, and before that, the Getchell First Book of Practical Studies. I stopped using those books, and now when I'm teaching, I'm sure you're talking about from my teaching. I use almost all original materials. So, yeah, there are exceptions. For example, I do have someone doing the Getchell now, and not the Getchell. What am I saying? Well, the Getchell too, but the Sigmund Herring. Like for a long, long time, I didn't teach anybody out of that book, but I pulled it back out again, and I've got someone doing that now. But the reason we're doing that with that student is because it's the very stuff that I didn't like was the stuff that student needed. So, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the different etude books. It's a category. It's not that I didn't like. Obviously, I like the Sigmund Herring books, but in my head, it has a purpose, and that purpose is a little, with the Herring books, it's a little narrow, and I needed something for my students that had a broader impact. Eventually, I will publish my own, like starting with the easiest one, the beginner method. I think that first book is almost ready to publish. The second book is very close to. The third one is more like the one I've been talking about with Gabriel here. I think I might actually have a two book, and as part of the full method. I think I think within the next 2 years or so, I will have a full method for that third level. Maybe not anything for the higher levels because I mean I don't know. We'll see. That's the same argument I had about not doing etude books in the first place, which ended up not being as good of an argument. All right. Well, you know what, guys? We made it. 2 hours of a Q and A, and I still have a voice left. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for celebrating with me. Our first one was in May 2019. And obviously we don't do every week, but we're pretty consistent. Anyway, God bless you guys. Thanks for hanging out. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.